Hello and welcome back. We're talking high school football championships here in WIVB's upstairs studio. That's Jonah Bronstein. I'm Nick Veronica. Our producer is Francis Beck. Last week with you here, we went through the Section 6 playoffs in the Monsignor Martin bracket. Today we're going to go through the results. We're going to look at this week's upcoming matchups. And Jonah spoke with AJ Feldman, a reporter from our Rochester station, to get insight on each Far West regional opponent.
And a scouting report on where to get a good garbage plate if you're going out to the games in Section 5 territory.
How about that? So, Jonah, you were out at every game last weekend. Do you have a favorite moment from championship weekend?
Well, the games got better as they went along. The three games that were on Thursday night were kind of runaway wins, especially in the second half for the three teams that won. And as we got into Friday's games, they got closer and tighter. Right down to the end, Lancaster beating Jamestown was the best game of the five. Came down to the last drive and the biggest classification between the two biggest teams playing. And Joe Andreessen, Buffalo Bills linebacker and special teams ace, was on that Lancaster sideline cheering them on and gave them a little bit of a pep talk after winning that game and told them to go all the way to the Dome and win the state championship. So that was probably the coolest moment, seeing Buffalo Joe out there cheering on his Lancaster teammates.
Cool. And Francis, how about you?
I think the best moment came at the very end of the weekend, the two Monsignor Martin semifinals. The last one, it was St. Joe's and St. Francis going to overtime at Athol Springs, and it was the freshman kicker Carter Petrie hitting the game-winning field goal in overtime to send Joe's to their first Monsignor Martin final since 2017. Just amazing what that program has done for the past few years. The turnaround that has, Jonah, I'm sure you know very well, this Joe's program couldn't be on the field at times with the, Canisius and St. Francis, and to see them now get a win over one of those programs and compete for a championship just speaks tons about what Coach Corona is doing.
Yeah, when Mike Corona took over that program, they were having trouble numbers-wise even fielding teams for games and didn't have a JV program when he came in, and they built up the numbers. They have 30 seniors this year, and this has been a season-long storyline with St. Joe's being really competitive. The first time they played Canisius at home, could have won that game, was leading in the third quarter, and had a chance to go ahead late, if not for a costly penalty. Played competitive with St. Francis. They shut out McKinley. They beat Jamestown. St. Joe's has been threatening to be one of the very best teams in Western New York, up there in the rankings. And now with this chance to play their rival Canisius for a championship, they could finish the year ranked number one in Western New York if they're able to win this game and move along to the state Catholic final, which will be in Western New York in a couple of weeks.
So let's keep rolling in the Monsignor Martin playoffs while we're here. So Canisius rolls overtime in the semifinal, and then St. Francis gets upset by St. Joe's, setting up Western New York's arguably the best rivalry, Canisius against Joe's for the championship. This rivalry's been fairly one-sided toward Canisius in the last generation or so. Championship game, you see any can St. Joe's do it?
Well, so this is the 102nd meeting between these two schools going back to 1921. Canisius has won 10 in a row and 20 of the past 21 meetings to get 2 games ahead in the series. So that kind of shows how St. Joe's was very far ahead of Canisius, and so Canisius has had the edge over the last 10 years or so. And Canisius has been the best team in Western New York throughout the season. They handily beat St. Francis in the regular season matchup to get home field advantage in these playoffs. And really their toughest game locally came against St. Joe's in a rivalry game that's always a spirited battle between the two teams and a large attendance, whether it's at St. Joe's or whether it's at Canisius. And now they're playing again here in the final on Canisius' home field, Kessler Field, out at the Stransky Athletic Complex in West Seneca. And two of the best teams in Western New York playing with a lot of stakes for a championship.
Elijah Kimball was the big story for Canisius in their semifinal victory. Over 300 yards rushing, 4 touchdowns. He's got the Power 5 offers. Can anyone stop him?
Nobody's really stopped him yet. I've seen games where he's kind of stopped himself with fumbles or going to the sideline with cramps or minor injuries. But, that 316 yards was his career high, and at least season high. But he's up around high 100s, 200 yards just about every game. He picked up an Ole Miss offer this week to go on top of that Oregon, Ohio State, Michigan offer. He was wearing the Ohio State gloves last week when they won against Timon, and he's as good as they come in Western New York, only a sophomore. And, he's very difficult to stop. But Canisius has another good running back in Amir Hernandez, spelling him here and there. A really good offensive line, a Division I tight end, Mason Allnut going to UNLV. That running game at Canisius overall is really hard to stop. St. Joe's runs the ball very well, too. And it'll be interesting because there was an injury to Canisius' quarterback, Mateo Brusco, Don't know shoulder injury. Don't know if he's going to play or not and how that's going to affect him, but probably not going to be at his best throwing the ball. And I think it's really going to be a battle of these two running games, who can stop the run and who can run the ball best.
Yeah, he went out early in that game, but at that point, Canisius had enough of a lead, or I think that may have been playing it safe for them. Putting the backup in, not getting any hurt for the championship game. But they also had a couple dinged up. You mentioned Allnut left the game early, and then Patrick Enright, another key lineman, was also dinged up, and I believe there was another lineman who I believe went back in but was injured as well, hurt. So this Canisius line is very talented. They have a couple of D1 linemen on there, but it doesn't look like they're 100% healthy, so that's an opportunity for Joes to get into this one. And then you mentioned it, Jonah, Kimball has had a little trouble with fumbles this year. He had, I believe there were 2 last game, or at least 2 for the team. I wasn't sure, can't remember if Kimball had both of them, but he muffed a punt and there was a fumble later. So, I mean, I'll put it to you this way. If Canisius plays like they did against Timon, I don't think they beat Joes.
And if Canisius plays like they did in the first time against Joe's, they're really in danger of losing this game. Now, maybe not being on Joe's home field changes the dynamic a little bit. What I like about this game is it's probably going to be a really well-attended game and a great atmosphere. Some of these sectional championship games at the stadium, some of them draw pretty big crowds, but not all of them do. But St. Joe's Canisius, as they say, there's cars parked on top of cars whenever these two teams play, even if one team is much better than the other. And now when they're playing for a championship and they're both good, I think there's going to be a large crowd out there in West Seneca to watch this game. And if you're going, I suggest getting there early to get good parking and find your seat in the bleachers.
Yeah, especially one way in, one way out to that complex. So, yeah, you better get there early and plan on staying late.
Yeah, Francis, let's give St. Joe's a little more credit for this upset last week. It's been over a decade since anyone besides Canisius or Franny's won the Monsignor Martin. How big, how small of an upset did you see St. Joe's over St. Francis last week?
I was shocked. And it was one of those back and forth games, almost a classic. And you thought there was this one point late in the game where Franny's defense makes a stop on 3rd and 10, sets up 4th and 10. Joe's was going to have to punt to Welka and St. Francis with a little over 4 minutes still, plenty of time to go down and score. But boneheaded penalty, the defender for St. Francis, I guess what happened was the play card came off the wrist for the St. Joe's player, and the defender found the play card and ripped it up and got unsportsmanlike. Just dumb penalty. It's little things like that cost you games. It extended that drive for Joe's, and by the time St. Francis got it back, they didn't have enough time. And it's just stuff like that. But it was an absolute classic to see these teams go back and forth. And even I think if St. Joe's didn't win that game, even if they just would have lost in overtime, that would have been huge for that program to see it take that big of a step to be really truly back in with the big boys in Monsignor Martin.
Anytime Canisius and St. Joe's get together, it's a chance to be a classic. This game for the championship, noon Saturday at Canisius' Stransky Athletic Complex.
One more note on Canisius. Our Carl Jones did a story on Channel 4 News and on WIVB.com about the late Kevon Walker, a wide receiver that played at Canisius last year, who died in his dorm room at St. Francis University in Pennsylvania a couple weeks back. The Canisius players had a very emotional funeral last Friday before their semifinal game. They're wearing helmet stickers to honor him. Elijah Kimball and some other players wore eye black that honored Kevon. And, it's just something weighing heavy on their hearts and perhaps inspiring their play. I don't want to be too trite about that, but it's definitely something that's hovering over this Canisius team through their playoff run.
Yeah, they had a moment of silence for him before the game. They had decals on their helmet, which, Canisius is known for their plain gold helmets, but they had a decal, and there were some shirts, and because that was their first game since he had passed. They didn't play last week, so I know that was definitely on their on their hearts and on their minds.
And there's a great photo on the Canisius High School Athletics website right now of Kevon breaking down the huddle after they had won at St. Joe's earlier this season. It's a sad photo because of what has happened in the recent weeks, but it's a very happy photo seeing how happy he was for his teammates having won that game and how happy they were to see him and share that celebratory moment when they beat St. Joe's earlier this season.
All right, so that's Monsignor Martin outlook there. We're going to switch over to Section 6. Jonah, you mentioned Joe Andreessen, Lancaster alum, at the game last week at the stadium, his home stadium now, playing with the Buffalo Bills. He watched his Legends beat Jamestown 28-21 to win the Section 6 title.
Yeah, Lancaster, this is their 6th time in 9 years that they've won the Class AA title in Section 6. Bennett won it 3 years in between. Lancaster quarterback Alex Krupa, 329 yards passing and 2 touchdowns, a long one to John Gang in the 4th quarter that put them ahead. Jamestown had led 14-7 at halftime, was looking to threaten another upset after they had upset Bennett, and it came down to Jamestown driving almost into the red zone on the last drive, and Justin Hartwig, who had 176 receiving yards, the last catch he made was a defensive catch on an interception to seal that win. And that was the best game of the 5, the best finish of the 5, and with the 2 largest teams, I mean, I think it kind of sets up as Lancaster. If they're not the best team in Western New York, they were the best team coming out of the stadium, the best win and the best performance.
They're playing Aquinas in the regional. Do you have a take on Rochester putting its privates in with the public schools?
One of my takes is I think Section 6 should consider that. I think there's a lot of things with the dwindling number of teams that can compete with each other in the Monsignor Martin. I would say it would have to be, all of the teams in AA. I think if other teams in the state are doing that maybe Section 6 should consider that more. I like it in basketball for certain reasons, especially in the AAA class where they need more teams. I do think it creates an unfairness when some of the sections in New York have private school teams in them and some of them don't. But if Section 6 had Canisius and St. Francis playing in the AA bracket and Rochester had Aquinas and some of these teams as well, it would I don't have a problem with it. I've had a problem with it in the past when sometimes you'd see a team like Aquinas and they're playing Class A or Class B. Sometimes they're kind of funny with the classifications with these private schools. I think they should all be in the highest classification if they're able to, recruit a little bit for their rosters.
Well, Jonah, I know last winter, and the talk was more downstate, but the talk was to have put all the private schools in a AAA together and possibly include the charter schools in there, which, the conversation about health and how that should be classified is a whole other thing. But yeah, that has been talked about statewide. It's interesting to note that Section 6 is kind of one of the oddballs out in not allowing the privates in. It's only us in Section 6 in Long Island that don't allow the privates in. Section 5 is most like the rest of the state. Now, part of that is because there's fewer private schools in a lot of the other sections. We don't think 6 is a lot because decades ago there used to be 30. But Rochester and those schools only have maybe 3 or 4 private schools, so they were already together kind of from the start. But it's a never-ending conversation with a lot of facets to it. It'll be interesting. I don't think whatever solution they come up with or not come up with, you're never going to make everyone happy.
I think whatever they should do, it should be standardized throughout the state. All the sections should be playing under the same rules and the same classifications with how they do it. I guess it does get a little complicated when you talk about teams like O'Hara or St. Mary's and what class they should be in, because if they were in AAA or AA, they would not be competitive at all, but I don't know where you really slot them in the lower classifications. But St. Francis, Canisius, and now St. Joe's, seeing them in AA or AAA, I think would be really good for West New York football and lead to a lot of cool matchups in the regular season and in earlier rounds of the playoffs.
All right, well, let's take a look back here on the field. Lancaster 9-2 this year. Their only 2 losses were to McQuaid and Bennett. Aquinas is split with McQuaid this year, beat him in the playoffs. Do you like Lancaster this week?
I think for the reason you mentioned, playing a private school that has a larger we're not usually able to say that they recruit, but able to draw students from a larger geographic footprint than a public school. I think it makes it very difficult for a school like Lancaster to compete talent-wise. But Lancaster is a very good program that's been in this game many times. They've won sectional championships. They're well coached. They have good numbers. They have size on the line. They have a good quarterback. They have all the pieces, I think, to make a run here in the state playoffs. But generally, and we'll talk about some of these teams and other games in Class C and D, generally speaking, in a lot of sports, football being among them, the higher you go in the classifications, I think the harder it is for Section 6 teams to advance through this regional round. And then when you get into the state playoffs, it's harder to win a AA championship than it is to win a Class C or a Class D championship. And I think that's going to hurt Lancaster, just being in that AA bracket and playing other AA teams, or as Francis alluded to, Aquinas might really belong in AAA. Although Lancaster is a AAA school in other sports as well.
Well, keep in mind, I believe it was the first game of the season Lancaster played McQuaid, who, by the way, played Bennett in this game the past couple of years, and I believe McQuaid won that game by 1 in overtime, or it was on a 2-point conversion.
Yeah.
A very close game, so Lancaster should feel like they have every right to be in this game.
Yeah, I was at that game. Lancaster, another game that Joe Andreessen was on the sideline watching. Lancaster got up by 2 touchdowns earlier in that game. Seemed to be controlling the game into the third quarter, but allowed McQuaid to come back and tie the game. Went to overtime. They went back and forth in overtime. Eric Rupp made a gutsy call to go for 2 instead of the extra point to tie the game. They didn't get the 2-point conversion, but they played neck and neck with McQuaid and really could have won that game with one more special teams play at the end.
All right, Aquinas is coming off a big win over Rush Henrietta. Joe, you spoke with AJ Feldman. He's a sports reporter for our sister station, Rochester WROC. He let you know what to know about Aquinas.
He did. He let us know in all the sections where there were upsets. Aquinas is not one of those teams, but as we get along into the breaks here, into the other classifications, Section 6 could have some favorable draws because maybe the best teams from Section 5 didn't win all of the sectional titles.
Let's take a listen.
Yeah, Aquinas, Class AA this year for Section 5 was really even. We had, eight teams in our class. Probably 6 or 7 of them walked into the sectional tournament with somewhat of a chance to win it, as evident by the fact that the 8 seed Rush Henrietta made it all the way into the championship game where they ended up losing to Aquinas. But Aquinas really kind of found their gear down the stretch of the season. They did lose to McQuaid in the regular season, but they redeemed themselves in the sectional semifinals, beating them 21-6. And the thing with Aquinas, they're good on offense. They have a good quarterback, Trent Buttles. They can pass it a little bit. Darian Battle's a really good running back. But the key to Aquinas is their defense. They shut out Penfield in the sectional quarterfinals, so it has a really good running game. They beat them 35-0. They held McQuaid to just 1 touchdown on offense, beat him 21-6, and then they only gave up 1 touchdown to Rush Henrietta in the championship game. 2 guys you're going to want to watch on that defense. Lucas Leone, the all-time leading tackler for Section 5 now. He's a middle linebacker. He's got over 100 tackles this year alone, over 400 for his career. And then Quante Gillians, a defensive end. He also plays a little bit of tight end, but he is committed to Syracuse right now. He's also getting courted by some other schools, even with that commitment, Michigan State. You know how college football works these days. So the defense has really been powering Aquinas down the stretch. And if they go on a deep run, I think it's going to be because, Darian Battle's a very good running back. But their defense is really the star of the show there.
All right, we're going to switch to Class A now. Jonas, Sweet Home against McKinley in the championship game, a shutout for the Panthers.
It was a return to glory for Sweet Home. This was their first time in a decade back in the sectional title, and then they won the section championship and going back to the Far West Regional. It was emotional for Coach Jeremy Zimmer, kind of remembering legendary Coach John Fowler, a Greater Buffalo Sports Hall of Famer, who had led Sweet Home's dominant run a decade ago when they won 8 sectional titles in 10 years. And the last time they were in this position, they went all the way for a state title in 2014. And now Sweet Home's back on a 10-game winning streak. They dominated the sectional final. Shutout victory, first shutout of the season. Rocco Panapinto, their quarterback, is a Connolly Cup finalist, but they can run the ball well. They scored 2 quick touchdowns. That game was maybe over by the end of the first quarter. They got it to 28-0 at halftime. And this is a team that scored more than 30 points in all but 1 game this season. So they're really rolling along and looking like the hottest team going into the state playoffs in the regional round.
Francis, Sweet Home's averaging 40 points a game in the playoffs, and they had 2 shutouts.
It comes down to a couple kids, but it starts with Rocco Panapinto, who, by the way, I think he has the best name in high school football. He just is. Jonah just mentioned, just during a Connolly Cup finalist, nomination or finalist award, and this kid has been starting out hot all season long. We've known him for the past couple years. They haven't been able to the team hasn't been able to put pieces together until this year. And you mentioned the 2 shutouts for this defense. They've been the big improvement to start the year. This Sweet Home team was in shootouts. By the time the late September, October rolled around, the defense was able to figure things out and has really come together in these last couple games. And they put out a fantastic show against a McKinley team that has a lot of speed and was really able to shut them down. It starts with their line, and that's what sets up DeQuan Stone, who had a couple touchdowns, and then their receivers, Damari Yancey and Ayer Patterson, who have had great years so far as well.
So you hear that, and you could say, who's hotter than Sweet Home? They're on fire right now. They lost in week 1, haven't lost since. They face a Brighton team in the Far West Regionals is 11-0. They haven't lost all year.
That should make for an exciting matchup, and there are going to be other regional games where the Section 6 opponent is maybe not facing the best team record-wise from Section 5, but that's not the case here. So we have two teams that are both ranked pretty high in the state. I think Sweet Home might be number 10 and Brighton number 11, something close to that. So it should make for a competitive matchup.
All right. Brighton, you look at their schedule. They're not rolling over teams the way Sweet Home is, but they're winning every game. Their championship was 7-7 after 3 quarters. They pulled away with 3 touchdowns in the 4th. Does Sweet Home, did they have that team in destiny type of feel? I read your quotes. The quotes were fairly more emotional than I expected.
It certainly does feel that way, at least talking to the coach. But the destiny sort of seemed like getting to this point, restoring to where they were under Coach John Fowler. Now, they had won state championship in the past at Sweet Home, but it wasn't like they were winning it every single year. So I don't want to say they can't go any further, but it does seem like the return to glory has happened, and now everything else is really just comes down to how good they are on the football field, how they match up, and whether they are the better team.
And Jonah, we haven't really seen this Sweet Home team in a while because they haven't been in the stadium make it to the Far West Regionals. And usually we find with a lot of teams, there's a bit of a growing pains when you reach the stadium. There's another growing pain to hit that next level. Very, very rarely do you see a team come out of nowhere, make it to the stadium, make it all the way to states. Usually it starts with going to the stadium, then you win, and then you gain some success. You get experience in the state playoffs, making it to the Dome.
And Sweet Home hasn't had to play in a tight game or make winning plays in the 4th quarter in several weeks, and sometimes that can catch up with the team. If they've been winning too easy, then all of a sudden they get into a really tough matchup against a really good opponent in a further playoff round. If you don't have those recent reps of playing at the end of games, that can sometimes hurt a team.
All right, Sweet Home has only been held under 30 points once all season. A tall task for Brighton, but let's hear from AJ.
Yeah, Brighton coming in undefeated, and they're kind of an interesting case because they went into the sectional tournament undefeated, but I think most people would have, given them the 4th best chance to win the sectional tournament. They really had kind of a lackluster resume. Their regular season schedule wasn't that strong. They beat a pretty good Irondequoit team, but they didn't play any of the top 3 dogs in the regular season, but they really proved themselves in the playoffs. They beat Monroe in the semifinals by a single point. Monroe, who you might remember, went to the Class B state semifinals last year. They got a lot of really talented players out there for the Red Jackets. And then they beat Canandaigua in the championship game, 28-7. A Grey Wolves team that has a lot of pedigree. They've won now 4 out of the last 6 sectional titles from Canandaigua. So a really impressive performance from Brighton in the playoffs. They didn't really elevate their game per se because they've been dominant all season long, but they really just kind of finally proved themselves for the first time. The thing you got to know about Brighton, they're going to play some good defense, and they're going to run the ball at you all game long. Gavin Parks, their senior running back, he's got 251 carries, nearly 2,000 yards, 1,877, and then 24 rushing touchdowns. So they can pass it a little bit. They got a good receiver on the outside, Wes Stirrup, but if you can stop Gavin Parks, you're going to go a long way to beating this Brighton team because, he's a very good running back. They got a good offensive line. He's the straw that stirs the drink there for Brighton. So Gavin Parks is the name you need to know. They got some good players on defense. Matthew Heininger had a big interception against Monroe, led a big goal line stand against Canandaigua, had a rushing touchdown as well to get him some Wildcat looks. So Brighton's a fun little story. This was their first ever sectional title. And they've been playing football for a long time there at Brighton. So, it's going to be fun to see how far Gavin Parks can take this team throughout the state tournament.
All right, Jonah, in Class B, we had an all-Buffalo matchup. We had Health Sciences against South Park for the championship, and South Park could not overcome Health Sciences. Look at those jerseys running down the sideline. They're sparkling out there to their 2nd straight title.
Yeah, Health Sciences got off to an early lead. South Park had Adam Nunes, the leading rusher in Western New York this year, threatening for a Western New York record. He didn't get quite there, but probably has the second most single-season yards of anybody in Western New York history. He had a great game, but Health Science had multiple players and was able to come back with different options and different offensive looks and eventually got a big lead. There were some injuries on the South Park side, and they couldn't come all the way back. It was a closer score, 22-18, but the game didn't feel that close. Health Science seemed to take over the game early on. They won it in the trenches, and then they held on to that lead in the second half. Even though they didn't score a lot of points, they relied on a defense that really hasn't allowed more than 20 points any more than 2 times this season, and that continued into the sectional finals.
Yeah, it came down to defense. Ty Parker knew exactly what the game plan was. It was stop Adam Nunes, and that's really what this Health Science team defense did, really beyond the first drive. We saw these two teams, offenses come out, score in their first drives, and we thought, oh, we're in for a shootout. And then things really slowed from there, and Health kind of just took away from it. South Park kind of scored late, but you could tell the game was out of hand, a little bit out of hand at that point. But it comes down to this Health team. They're just physical. They have speed, and they executed their game plan.
Jonah, we say it's Health Science's second straight title, but as you noted in your story, Coach Ty Parker, he's proud of what they accomplished before this, partner with Maritime.
Yeah, if you look at the photos that accompany our story on WIVB.com and out there kind of watching the scene, they were all holding up 5 fingers because they've won 5 championships and really 5 in a row at the Class B level. They were previously combined with Maritime Charter, and there was a period of time where they moved up into Class A and didn't win sectional titles. But the last 5 seasons that Health Science, this program under Ty Parker, has played at Class B, they've won the championship. They're undefeated in games at the stadium, and they've been to this regional round, obviously 5 times now. They've won it 3 times before, or 2 times before. Last year they didn't win, but this is a program that knows how to get this far and win in this game. And they're going to play a team out in Rochester-Eastridge that was a little bit lower seeded in the bracket, not necessarily the number 1 seed, not a team that's been in this game a lot. We're going to hear from A.J. Feldman a little bit later, but he had mentioned that of all the teams coming out of Section 5 into this regional, Far West regional round, they're probably the weakest in terms of resume and record and things like that.
Before we move on, can we give a little more praise to Adam Nunes from South Park? What a season he had. He set the all-time single-game record for a Section 6, over 500 yards in one game, and he's among the top rushers nationally.
Yeah, and he had 161 yards and a touchdown in the sectional final. He finished 2,468 yards for his season. And, yeah, Max Press rates him among the top 20. There might be some players that continue to play and pass him, but not many. He's probably going to finish the year at least in the top 25 nationally. And, a great season and a great player. And he played very well to the end. He was not at all the reason why South Park lost that game. If they had a few more Adam Nunes, maybe they would have been more competitive. And one thing that was cool about seeing these two Buffalo teams play each other is that the Health Sciences players and coaches knew Adam Nunes really well. They were very congratulatory towards him. And it was a lot like seeing, a brotherly matchup of teams and people that grew up playing youth football together. And Health Science won the game, but there was a lot of Buffalo pride on both sidelines in that game.
All right, Health Science is looking to get past the Far West Regional. Last year they lost it this round. They're playing an Eastridge team 6-4. They have a 6-4 record. They lost their first 2 games of the year. They're picking up late, but man, you're looking at what Health Sciences can do, and you see 6-4 out there. That's not what you expect this time of year.
And I think if you're Coach Ty Parker, you want to make sure to keep your team's expectations, kind of low for yourself, not walk into that game too high thinking, oh, this is a 6-4 team, we got this in the bag, because, teams can get hot at the right time and, and really make a run for it. So I think, anything can happen in the playoffs that, you get the right matchup, a few things go your way, you can find your way into a sectional title pretty happy. We see that in all sports. There was in field hockey, there was a team that was below 500, the 7th seed, and almost won a sectional title. So that stuff happens all the time, especially in high school sports. So I think if you're coach, if you're Health Sciences, you can't chalk this up to a W already.
And a year ago, Health Sciences ran into a Monroe team that was undefeated, I believe ranked #1 in the state. And Health Sciences played them very tough. It came down to a last drive that Health Sciences didn't score on, but they advanced past the 50 and kind of got pretty close to extending that game. This time they don't face a juggernaut matchup like that, and that might give them a better opportunity to advance out of the regional round. But then looking ahead, it's very possible that in the semifinals, the winner of this game is going to play state #1 Maine Endwell. So Health Sciences might have a little bit of an easier time getting one more step further in the state playoffs, but then it's going to get a lot tougher a week from now.
All right, let's follow up with AJ to learn a little bit more about this matchup with Eastridge.
So Eastridge is a team that went winless last year. They did not win a single game this year. And Class B is kind of an interesting case this year in Section 5. There were only 5 teams in the classification. 2 of them were charter schools that are really still trying to find their footing in Section 5 football here. So they beat HFL on a Hail Mary, which I kind of alluded to before. Dwayne Collins, with 7 seconds to go from about 35 yards out, leaped up, made an amazing catch to beat HFL. And then they really kind of took it to Batavia in the sectional title game. Batavia came into that game undefeated. They did play them tight in the regular season. It was just a 7-0 game. But Eastridge is a fun little story. They've got some talented players on the outside. This isn't, they're not a helpless squad. They've got some really talented players. Benny Calixto at quarterback, Christian Beeson, their original starting running back. I guess disciplinary issues, I guess you could say. I don't think he's going to be playing in this next game. So Christian Beeson stepped up kind of as their primary running back. He did a good job in the sectional championship game. Dwayne Collins on the outside. Steven Masetta as well can catch the ball. And then they have a pretty good defense as well. Ian Schneeberger kind of leading the way there. So Eastridge, I would probably say of the 5 teams that Section 5, the champions, produced, I'd say Eastridge might be the weakest compared to some of the Class B teams in the past and maybe what they're going to face this weekend. But, they're a really fun story. They got some talented players, and I think it's going to be fun to see if they can, step up their game again when they face a health sciences team that has really, proven themselves over the last couple of years going to a lot of championship games.
Jonah, switching over to Class C now. Salamanca stayed perfect and a big win over Portville. They're now #1 in the state poll.
Yeah, and the only undefeated team remaining in Western New York. That was true going into the section and finals, and they kept that going. Had one of the most impressive performances at the stadium. Quarterback Maddox Isaac, I think he channeled Josh Aaron a little bit. He was hurdling defenders on his way to the end zone. They were not only a dominant team, but looked like maybe the most confident team. And they were here last year. They won the regional, Far West Regional, on their way to the state semifinals a year ago, and haven't lost at all this season and seem like they're on a path to perhaps get back to the state Final Four again.
And I want to pull one quote here. Coach Chad Bartosik, in your story, he said, direct quote, "Last year there was a bit of, woo, we made it here. Now these guys just want more. They had their sights set on more than just the Far West Regional appearance."
Yeah, well, a year ago it was Salamanca winning their first sectional title in 20 years. Now they won their first sectional title in 1 year. And a lot of the players are back from last year. This was a basketball program that went to the state semifinals. They're good in a lot of other sports. So you have a championship culture now at Salamanca Athletics, and they're not just satisfied with a sectional title. They're undefeated, and they're #1 in the state. They're making a run at the state championship, and they expect to go far in the state playoffs, and they're very confident going into this Far West Regional game.
Yeah, this Salamanca team, Jonah, you said it perfectly. They were a team that was just glad to be there last year, win a sectional title. Now it feels like they're becoming an established program in Western New York. And, Maddox Isaac, just a phenomenal performance. I don't know why he didn't get a Connolly Cup. He wasn't named as a Connolly Cup finalist. He's put together a fantastic season and had a great performance at the stadium, taking the team really at times on his back. You can see right now the touchdown where he put his hand up. He did get flagged on that for taunting, I guess. But it was still a cool moment there. But, yeah, he can run it. He can throw it. Just a true athlete on the field.
I think that just shows their confidence level. Obviously you don't want to condone taunting, but if you're that good, if you're that far ahead of the defense that you can throw up a finger and celebrate at the 20-yard line, it's
he threw up his index finger, just to be clear for everybody.
Yeah, but your eyesight's better than mine. I wasn't sure what figure that was. But it's not. It gets you a flag, and it's not something that we're saying high school players should do. But it does show how good and how dominant that team was, that they were able to kind of have some of those extracurricular activities while they were on their way to the end zone.
This Salamanca team has got to be one of the most dominant teams in recent memory. They've had one game within 3 touchdowns all season. They went through the playoffs, outscoring opponents 139-31. They're number 1 in the state poll. We've seen very good teams come out of Western New York. Maybe that there's some more challenge across the state in the higher divisions, but the Salamanca team's got to be up there in recent memory.
Yeah, going back to the semifinals, they beat Medina 50-7. And Medina's a really good program that's been winning sectional titles and into these regional state playoff games in years past. They were good again this year, ranked in the top 10. Salamanca's pushing in the local polls. Right now they're tied with Health Science. They're both co-number 1s. And probably see who goes further in the state playoffs is probably going to finish the year as the number 1 small school in the Western New York rankings.
Yeah, I think their closest game was Portville earlier in the season. I think that was a touchdown game. Obviously, they just avenged that. I mean, the only concern you have if you're Salamanca, you haven't been in too many close games. And, so how are they going to feel when it is crunch time and they're up against it? Do they have the guys that will be able to respond? Granted, it was a close game last year, so maybe they have the guy, they can kind of remember that from last year. But, I mean, if there's a concern for Salamanca, that might be the only one.
It's just so funny to hear they avenged their only 1-score game of the year. It's just, that's what we're talking about here. 11-0 Salamanca. They are facing East Rochester-Gananda, ERG, who is 9-1. They lost week 1 and haven't lost since.
Yeah, it should make this one of the better games. There are some. We've talked about some of these regional games where there were upsets in the Section 5 playoffs, and that could favor Section 6. This isn't one of them. At the same time, Class C and Class D maybe are the classifications where the Section 6 teams have the best overall chance at winning state championships, but they're not the regional matchups that are giving them the easiest path to get along to the semifinals.
I mean, it's been said in years past that, in C and D, or especially D, that this regional game really determines who the state champion is, because it's often the 2 toughest in the state are 6 and 5 in Class D. So that's certainly, that's certainly history kind of says that to us.
And it'll be interesting to see how much of a crowd Salamanca brings out there to Brockport. They probably had the biggest following them along to the stadium, and that's a pretty far drive.
I believe they had 1 or 2 fan buses.
Yeah, buses, fans tailgating. They got a lot of support. The same thing happened with the basketball team when it was making their moves. And, Coach Chad Bartozik's an excellent coach. He played tight end at UB. He won sectional titles with Franklinville, Ellicottville. He's the athletic director at Salamanca. He is
Salamanca grad.
Salamanca graduate. He was on the team in 1999 when they got to the state championship game. He's a big reason why. He is the primary reason why Salamanca has returned to glory in the past 2 years. But I want to give a quick shout out to one assistant coach on the staff. And, we're going to talk with A.J. Feldman. He's going to give a little bit of the breakdown on where to eat out by SUNY Brockport. Now, this game was moved to Pittsford-Sutherland. It's not at Brockport.
This game, it was moved. It's now 3 o'clock Saturday at Pittsford-Sutherland. Brockport's Division III team has a bowl game Saturday morning now, so they had to shuffle around the games a little bit.
Well, that's a little bit where I'm going here. Pittsford-Sutherland is close enough. It's the Rochester region, but assistant coach Jason Wass was my college roommate at Brockport. We both got there in the year 2000. He played a little bit of football there, so all of those Salamanca fans aren't going to need A.J. Feldman to tell them where to get lunch. They can just ask Coach Wass, and he'll give them the breakdown.
Well, there you have it. All right, so this game at Pittsford-Sutherland. A.J., let's hear it.
Yeah, East Rochester-Gananda, they've had some good success in the past. They've gone to the state semifinals. I believe it was 21 or 22. And this has been the case with ERG for a while. They will pass the ball more than, your traditional Class C team, and really more than just about any Section 5 team and, a high school team you expect. Ben Newman is a really talented quarterback for them. He's their all-time leader in touchdown passes at ERG, and they've got a pretty proud football history. He's got 31 touchdowns on the year, nearly 2,400 yards passing. Got some good wideouts there, Noah Mather and Justice Allen. And then C.D. Sneed, their running back, who can also catch the ball to their backfield. He's had a good year, too. Over 1,000 yards, 14 touchdowns. They have had some, I guess, more trouble maybe on the defensive side of the ball, stopping some of the more powerful rushing attacks out there. So I'm going to be interested to see what they do against Salamanca. They played Leroy Calmum in the regular season. I watched that game, and it was kind of just a back and forth game where Leroy just kind of ran the ball on him, and eventually, ERG was able to put him away, and they kind of handled them pretty easily in the sectional championship game. But certainly, I guess the headline there is for a Class C team, they're going to throw the ball more than you expect out of a normal small school team.
And finally, in Class D, Clymer, Sherman, Panama. CSP wins their second straight title, their fourth in 7 years. And Jonah, I loved the lead of your story on WIVB.com. You can't spell championship without CSP.
At least I think that's correct. You're my editor, so you'd have to tell me if that was correct spelling
not
or
directly in order, but you need them.
Yeah, I was proud of that one myself too, and I was, you don't really want to root for certain teams to win, but when you have a lead like that floating around in your head, you do want the team that allows you to write that lead to win, because I don't know what I would have done. Franklinville, Ellicottville, you don't use any of those letters in spelling championships, so I would have had to come up with something different.
Tell you to EF off, I think.
maybe.
This CSP puts up another great performance at the stadium. I was looking at his stats, and to be honest, they're kind of underwhelming on paper. He had a fantastic showing. It says 6 of 17 for 87 yards, 2 touchdowns, and he ran for 83 yards on 15 carries and 2 touchdowns. But he was the show, where there was running the ball, throwing the ball. There was nothing that Franklinville, Ellicottville really could do to stop him, and it was kind of like last year where he put the team on his back and reminded us a little bit of Josh Allen on the field there in terms of doing what needed to be done in order to, score for his team.
He wears number 14, so last year when they won, I was calling them, making homages to Stephon Diggs, but maybe we're going to have to come up with Ryan Fitzpatrick or Frank Reich or a quarterback comparison to describe his performance. And he's a Connolly Cup nominee. He's been one of the best players in Western New York, best quarterbacks in Western New York in the conversation. But he even admitted after the game that he made some mistakes early on in that game. That's why it was close for the first half. CSP pulled away in the second half, but he didn't play at his best early on, and then they got it going in the second half and second quarter, really. And you could see that this is a team that had been in that moment before. They've been to state semifinals and state championship games before, and that playoff experience, I think, really worked out for them at the stadium and probably is going to come into play and help them along here now into the state playoffs in the Far West Regional.
So Cantonese, he threw for 2, he ran for 2, they won big, 33-8, and you're still saying there's room for improvement?
Early on, he was missing throws and made some mistakes that allowed Franklinville, Ellicottville to, score on the other end and keep the game close. It didn't turn out to be a major factor in how the game was decided.
I think, you look at the box score, they didn't score until the second quarter, so it was, I think CSP kind of got off to a slow start offensively.
All right, CSP lost in last year's state semifinals to eventual champion Tioga. They want to get back there. They have a heck of a matchup in the Far West Regional. They play, this is a heavyweight, as far as Class D is concerned, a heavyweight matchup. Number 1, CSP against number 2, Avon.
Right, top 2 teams in the state, so this really could be a de facto state championship game in a way, at least according to those state rankings. The winner coming out of this game is probably the favorite going into the state semifinals and maybe moving along to the championship game at the JMA Wireless Dome. And, this Avon team is a team that doesn't allow a lot of points. They won their Section 5 championship game 28-0. They've only allowed 3 total points in 3 playoff games. CSP is a fast-paced offensive team, so that's going to be a real clash in styles between a tough defense and an offense that expects to move the ball and put it in the end zone.
When you go through Avon's schedule, you say, holy cow, every single game this year has been a blowout.
Yeah, that's what happens when, you're one of the best teams in Class D, and especially defensively, when you see that, you can, really build a lot of confidence and take down a lot of different offenses.
All right, so just to emphasize one more time, it's state poll, number 1 CSP against number 2 Avon. That game's Friday at Brockport. They got a tall task. It's going to be a great matchup. AJ, what should we know about Avon?
Class D, it's tough to tell what's going on with Class D this year because Avon really just took it to everybody. They really played in no close games. I think their closest 2 games this entire season were in the sectional semifinals and finals. and they beat Canisius Greenwood 31-3, and they beat Alexander 28-0. So this is certainly going to be a step up in competition, going up against the number one team in the state. I know CSP's played some, they scheduled their schedule pretty well there. So, and Avon's kind of a fun little story. Their quarterback got hurt in, I think, the second or third week of the season, and they put in Cal Dolgis there, who started the year as their wide receiver, and he's just been really leading the way there. He's got 29 touchdowns on the year, rushing touchdowns, over nearly 1,300 yards on the ground. They got another running back, Wes Farley, who's got 1,500 yards on the season, 23 touchdowns. So they are definitely your more traditional Class D team. They're going to run the ball a lot, especially given the fact that one of their best wide receivers is now playing quarterback. But he has thrown the ball a little bit, so you can't totally, stack the box. But, I haven't seen Avon play much this year because a lot of the times when we go out to see their games, you just got to be there for a quarter, and then they're going to, be up 3 touchdowns and you can go to the next game. So Avon is going to be a fun case because they've really handled all their competition this year, but CSP is going to be by far the best team they've played this season.
All right, that should be interesting. And maybe if we trust the state rankings, that'll be the team that is favored to win the state championship coming out of that game. All right, AJ, I'll get you out of here on one last question. It's a little bit of a pop quiz, but if somebody's going out to SUNY Brockport for these games, or Pittsford Sutherland, can you recommend a garbage plate spot or somewhere to get lunch or dinner?
Dogtown is the famous one downtown, but I haven't eaten too much in Brockport. My kind of saying with the garbage plates is kind of how I feel a little bit about wings in Buffalo. You're going to get a good chicken wing everywhere. The strength of the garbage plate isn't the fact that you got to go to one certain spot and get a really good garbage plate. You can go just about anywhere and get a nice slop of food on your plate and, go home 2,000 calories later with a good little meal. So that's what I'll have to say about the garbage plate scene there.
All right. Thanks for that, AJ. We'll be looking out for your coverage on News Channel 8 and RochesterFirst.com, and enjoy the games this weekend.
All right. Same to you. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, AJ. Thank you guys for watching with us. We want to give a shout, by the way, our News 4 photographer, Cullen Tung, was out there. These highlights you're seeing on screen. Cullen, thank you for being out there for us.
Yeah, he braved through the rain and everything. First time at the stadium, and he troopered through it.
He did a great job, and he also drove us there and back in the station vehicle. So I was pretty tired, but I was only sitting in the press box type in and going down for the occasional interview. He was running up and down the sidelines, shooting all the highlights, but still had more energy to drive home. He is a young guy. He's got a little bit more mitochondria length than I do.
All right. So, reminder, Friday, we got Class D, Far West Regional game. That's CSP against Avon, I apologize. And we have Friday, Class AA, Lancaster against Aquinas. Saturday's jam-packed. Noon is the Monsignor Martin Championship. Canisius against Joe's. 3 o'clock at Pittsford Sutherland is Salamanca against East Rochester-Gananda. Gananda.
ERG.
ERG.
Yeah, that's the easiest way to say it.
But their crew team is really good.
Yeah.
All right, after that, we got the Class B game at 4 o'clock. That one is back at Brockport. Health Sciences against Eastridge, and then Class A Saturday night, Sweet Home against Brighton. Jonah, I know you love seeing how did Section 6 do? How do we look last year? How are we looking this year?
Yeah, that's always something to watch in these Far West Regional in all the different sports. There's some sports where Section 5 dominates. There's some sports where Section 6 dominates. And then in some of these marquee sports, football and basketball, it's a bit more even. And it's interesting to note year by year who gets the better of which schools. Home field advantage makes a difference. Last year, these games were at Williamsville South, and the Section 6 teams went 3-2, winning the majority of the games. Over the past 3 years, Rochester has an 8-7 record, a little bit of an advantage. So if Buffalo teams can win more than 3 of the 5, it'll even up that record in the 4-year span, which coincides with the high school careers of all these seniors. If Rochester has the advantage, then they're going to pull ahead with a more significant lead in this 4-year block.
All right. Are you planning to go out to Stransky this weekend to see Joe's Canisius?
Oh, I'll be there. I'll be there early, getting my parking spot and making sure that I can, get some good real estate on the sideline and cover that game to the best of my ability.
All right. And you'll be able to find that recap on WIVB.com along with all of our high school coverage. Thank you guys for stopping in. Along for Jonah and Francis, I'm Nick. Thank you so much.